Do you want to learn how you can create an API which can dynamically create a certificate and output a PDF for your users? In this video, that is exactly what I'm going to show you how to do. Hi guys, my name is Sam with Complete Coding, where our aim is to make you into the best AWS and serverless developer that you can be. In this video, we're going to be using Typescript to create an API that allows us to send up the name of a user, and it will automatically generate a certificate for that user. We're going to be creating an API gateway endpoint using AWS Lambda and storing the certificate templates in S3. Once we've deployed this, we're going to have an API which will automatically generate a certificate just like this one, and you can customize the name dynamically in your API. So let's jump into the code and see how we can create our API. So now that we're in the code, I'm in a repo where I've just created it, and I create it using the serverless create --template, and for this we're using AWS -NodeJS Typescript, and that is the template we're using here. If we look inside our folder structure, we can see that there is the default handler.ts, which comes when you run this create script. All I've done is installed the npm packages required. So now the first thing we need to do is, well, the way I like to do it is to restructure this a little bit. So I'm going to create a new folder called source. Inside that, I'm going to create functions, and inside that a folder for the function I'm going to create. In this case, it's going to be create certificate, and I'm just going to copy that for later. And now we can move our handler into that folder, and I also like to rename this to index.ts and update the name of the function to handler. So now that we've got that all set up, we can go into our serverless.ts and just correct the API and function definitions in this section. So now the function is going to be called create certificate, and the handler, I'm going to start from scratch, so it's going to be source/function/create certificate/index.handler. The method, in our case, we're not going to do a GET request, we're actually going to do a POST request. And the path I'm going to do as certificate. So every time we do a post to /certificate on our API, it's going to trigger this function. So if we jump into our create, we are going to do a couple of things. The first thing is we're going to use a package which is called pdflib. So to use that, first we need to install it. So npm install -s, and it is pdf-lib. And whilst that is installing, we can actually import that. So import curly brackets pdf document from, and then it's pdflib. So now that we've imported that, what this document tool does is it allows us to read a PDF that may be a template and then populate fields inside that PDF. So for us, the first thing we need to do is get the body of the API request. So const body, and this is normally JSON.parse event.body. So this is probably what you do most of the time when you need to get the event body. But later on, we're going to be actually changing this API to be working with a base 64 encoded string so that we can actually send the PDF as a base 64 encoded string. What this means is if we go into our serverless.ts and we find our API gateway config, we're going to be making one small change in here, which is to set binary media types, and that's going to be an array with a string of */*. What this means is that both the input and the output of our APIs is going to be turned into a binary string. This does mean we need to make a bit of a difference in our API request. So back in our handler, instead of doing just JSON parse event.body, we need to do JSON.parse of buffer.from event.body, and we have to specify that the event.body equals base 64, and then turn this base 64 buffer into a string. So we're taking the event body, which is base 64, turning it into a buffer, and then turning that into a string, which we can then use JSON parse on to get the body. This is a little bit of an extra step, but is required if you want to send the actual PDF as a response. So now that we have the body, we're actually going to get a template from S3. So const template equals await s3 dot get object, and here it's saying there's an error because we can't find s3, which is exactly kind of what we expect. So here we want to import, and it's capital S3 from AWS SDK, and this becomes part of every Lambda. And then on the line after that, we can say const lowercase s3 equals a new version of the s3 uppercase, like that. So here now we have s3, and we're calling get object, and this takes a parameter of the bucket, and we're going to pass the bucket name in as an environment variable. So we can do process.env.bucket name, and then the second part is what file name do we want to get, and they call that the key. And in our case, the key is going to be body.certificate template. So now that we've defined the get object, we want to turn this into a promise by adding .promise at the end, so that this will be awaited and the template will actually be the response that we want. Now we need to load this PDF template into this PDF document tool. So we do that by saying const PDF doc equals await PDF document dot load, and now we want to load in template dot body because that is going to be the content of the PDF, and we actually want to turn this into a string, and we want to say that it's going to be a base 64 string. So now we have our PDF document. We can start doing some interesting things. First, we can get the form, so const form equals pdfdoc.get form. So, and the form is the part of the PDF document that is actually editable. So for us, that is going to be the name of the person who's receiving the certificate, but you could add a lot more. Next, we want to actually rename one of the fields, so form.getText field, and we've named the field as name. And before we actually set the text for that, we want to set alignment, and that is going to be text alignment dot center, where the value of text alignment is also imported from the PDF lib. This just makes sure that the name is in the center of the page, and that looks a lot nicer. Next, what we can do is get that same name form field, and this time we're going to do a set text, and this is going to be body.name. So whatever name is passed up in the body of the API request is the one that is going to be added to this field. Finally, now that we've added our customization to our PDF, we want to do form.flatten, and that just locks all of these in place so they can't be edited later. If you wanted, you could add a lot more fields into your form and pass up a lot more data inside your API, such as the date it was awarded, if it has an expiry date, or you could even dynamically change the name of the certificate if you wanted. So now that we've completed that form, what we want to do is we want to actually get that ready to turn into an API response. So we're going to do that by saying const PDF out equals, again, we're going to await, and it's going to be the PDF doc, which is the document we loaded it into. And then we're going to do dot save as base64, which is going to turn this into a base64 string. Now that we have that, we can create our response. So I'm just going to delete this. We are still going to have a status code of 200. The body is now going to be PDF out. We need to set a flag of is base64 encoded and set that to true. And then we can also set some headers, such as the content-type, and set that to application/PDF, and also set an access control, access-control-allow-origin, and set that to star, which means that any web page is allowed to make a request to this API. So this is all good, and we have all of our logic, but sometimes things might go wrong. Maybe the S3 object isn't in the place it needs to be, or they don't pass up a name, or even they don't pass up the certificate template. So in that case, what we're going to do is wrap all of this in a try catch. So add try at the very start, and then after our return statement, add a catch, where we're going to catch the error. So here we're going to add a console.log, because it's always nice to know what the error is. We also, just before the catch, need to add a curly brace to close off the first part of the try. And after we've console logged it, we need to return an error via HTTP. So return this object with a status code of, I'm going to go with a 500, although this could be a user-caused error, in which case it would be a 400. And I'm going to add a body, and this is going to be a JSON.stringify, and there's going to be a message of error.message. So that's just going to tell the user if they've made some incorrect request it's going to pass back the message of the error. So now that we have all of this done, we notice that we've used S3, so we actually need to first create an S3 bucket and then give this Lambda permissions to access that S3 bucket. So back in our serverless.ts, to create our S3, if we go right the way to the bottom of our code, so after functions, we can add a resources section. So the first word is resources with a lowercase r. The second one is resources with an uppercase R. I'm not sure why exactly they require this in serverless, but it's something that we do need to do. Now in here, we want to have basically the bucket that stores the templates. So template bucket, and that is going to have a type. The type is going to be AWS S3 : bucket. We're then going to have basically just a single property, and that is going to be an object. And here we're going to define the bucket name. And instead of just hard coding it here, we're actually going to use a variable system in serverless. So if we put $, and then inside the curly braces put self : custom.bucket name, and we copy the bucket name. We can then scroll up to our custom section, add the bucket name here, and again we're going to mix up some hard-coded bucket name but with a little bit of customization. So here we're going to call this something along the lines of my certificate templates, but after that I'm going to add another reference here. So again it's self : and instead of referencing the custom section, we're going to reference the provider. So self : provider.stage. So if we deploy this to dev, it will add -dev on the end. If it's a UAT or a QA, it will add UAT or QA. And finally, if it's production, it will add -production to the end of the bucket name. That's really useful because every bucket needs to be completely unique. And by adding variables like this, it means your different deployments won't conflict with one another. So now that we have our bucket, the last thing we really need to do in here is add the permissions to allow the functions to access that bucket. We do that by adding IAM role statements, and this is going to be an array of objects. And in our case, we're just going to say there's an effect, and the effect is allow. We have an action, and that action is going to be S3 with a lowercase s, :*, which means that we are allowed to do anything we want in S3. And the resource, if I can spell that right. And the resource, we're just going to say star for now, which would mean this Lambda can access any of the S3 buckets in this account, but for now that is okay for us. As well as the access IAM role statement, in our code we used the bucket name dynamically. So in our environment variables, we need to copy the bucket name, which we pass in as an environment variable to here. And then that is also going to reference this bucket name. So what we can do is do another string with $ curly braces, self : custom dot bucket name, which is going to point at the same variable we've defined in our custom section, so everything will work together. Now that we have all of this set up, we can go into our terminal and run Sls Deploy, but I'm going to add two little extra things to my provider. to make this a little bit easier to use. So for me, I'm running out of Germany, so I want to set the region to EU-West-1. I also want to set a profile, and then this is going to basically define which AWS credentials from my credentials file I'm deploying with. So I'm just going to copy those and paste them in for my use case. You should paste in whichever credentials you have for the account that you want to deploy to. Now that we have all of that, I'm going to run Sls Deploy, and this is going to then create our API, as well as the S3 bucket that we're going to upload our templates to. This takes a little bit of time, so I'll get back to you when that is done. So now that has finished deploying, we can see there is a single endpoint, a post request to /certificate. But before we actually try and hit this, we need to add our certificate to our S3 bucket. So I'm just going to do this through the console for now, but if you wanted to automate this, you could use something like Serverless S3 sync to sync all of your templates up via API. So in S3, we can look at our new buckets, and if I sort by creation date, we can see we have the bucket of my certificate templates-dev, which is what we expect. And in here, I'm then just going to manually upload a file, and that is on my desktop. So to create this PDF, I just found a template online and then used an online tool called which allows you to add a form to a PDF. I'm going to link that in the description below. So if you want to make your own templates, you can just start with a blank PDF or a PDF with the styling that you like, and then just add on your own form fields for things such as your name or the certificate that's being awarded. I'm going to upload my serverless wizard one, and I'm actually going to copy the name of that, as we'll use that in our API request. So if we go into our code and copy the URL that we've been given and paste that into Postman and change this to a post request, because we're using Postman because it's a lot easier to do a post request, but this could be used for something such as when someone completes an online course, they get sent a certificate, and you could do this inside a Lambda as an API request. So we're going to set the body on this to be a raw JSON input, and here there's going to be two things. The first thing, if we go back to our code, we're going to be looking for body.certificate template. So certificate template, and this is going to be the name of the template file that we just uploaded, which in our case is serverlesswizard.pdf. And the second thing is going to be a name, and for this one I'm just going to go with Sam Williams. And now what we can do is we can send that request, and if I make this a bit bigger, we can see that we got a response of the PDF template with Sam Williams as the response. This just means that we can make as many requests as we want and customize this field here. So if I change that to Bob Jones, make the request, we now have the response of Bob Jones inside this certificate. This can be used for loads of different things, and one of the use cases I've had previously is actually creating like an itinerary or creating an order form where you need to have 5 or 6 different items in that form, and we used this exact tool to add those items to a PDF template, and we then sent that dynamically to the user. If you wanted, you could create a lot more templates, and you could have a whole system where you're able to add data to templates dynamically. In this video, we have set up a new repo where we are able to automatically generate a PDF certificate and dynamically fill that certificate with data such as the user's name. This is a really cool concept, and you can use this for loads of different things. You could add more details to your certificate, or you could use this for generating a delivery form or an inventory list. There are loads of ideas that you could come up with and multiple different ways that this application could be used in your business. If you've learned something new in this video, then make sure to hit that thumbs up button, as it really helps out the channel. And if you haven't done already, make sure to subscribe, as we release regular content on AWS and Serverless to help you become the best developer that you can be. Thank you, and I'll see you in the next video.